The topic of this panel is really investment opportunities across the world. We've actually got a very diverse group of people from Mongolia, from Australia, and, well, power stations that really don't have a specific location yet, but can be deployed anywhere, and we'll hear about that a little bit more detail later on. But what we want to do is just sketch out, okay, what kind of investment opportunities are there and how to attract investments and what's going to happen in each of these markets. And particularly, if you have any questions, certainly feel free to raise your hand. We like to make it a little bit more interactive, so please feel free to raise your hand if you've got any particular question to the panelists. We should have enough time anyway. But let's kick off with a country that really hasn't been in the attention much, Mongolia, which obviously is a very big country with a small population, but with a huge amount of resources, and has finally over the last few years come into the forefront of development, in particular on the energy side, both for coal and for increasingly wind and other resources. Bekzod, just from your perspective, obviously, can you give a bit of background on Prophecy Coal and what you do in the market, but also what kind of investment opportunities are you looking for? What kind of investments are you attracting for Mongolia specifically?
Thank you. Prophecy Coal is a Canada-listed company, and we operate in Mongolia. We operate two mines, coal mines in Mongolia, and one of them is beginning to export coal to Russia and supplies the coal to local utilities. And another deposit is we're developing a power plant project on that deposit. It's 600 megawatt power plant project, which is going to be done in two phases. And the first phase is 300 megawatt. Specifically, you mentioned about Mongolia that the economic development is high, and mainly due to the development of the mining sector in Mongolia. And you're talking about primarily about coal, copper, and gold. And this has created a significant challenge in infrastructure. And you're talking about transport infrastructure, you're talking about power infrastructure and other areas. The country obviously requires significant investment to upgrade and improve the current state of infrastructure, increase the capacity. As if we talk, for example, we're talking about power, it is expected that by 2016 the power deficit will reach 600 megawatt.
And is that 600 megawatts, are there enough projects in the pipeline to ensure that there's enough supply?
Well, there are projects in the pipeline. However, the country never worked on this model of attracting the private investment into the power sector, and this creates specific challenges for the government, as they are not familiar the way the independent power plants operate. You're talking about for example, one of the issues is the capacity charges, that the power plants have to be compensated for the finances that they attract into the project, that whether the government purchases the power or not, the money has to be paid back to the lenders and the investors. And a number of other issues, for example, on coal supply. Although Mongolia has a lot of coal, the deposits that are supplying currently to the utilities, they need further investments and etc. And the whole industry is subsidized. You're talking about the power industry, you're talking about the coal industry, the state-owned industry, which are all subsidized, and the prices do not reflect the cost. And to attract the private investment into this sector, you need to bring the price level to the, you need to bring the prices to the adequate level. which means increases in electricity prices and etc. Which again shows that there are a lot of challenges for the country to work on this model to attract the private investment into the power sector.
Well, that's an issue that you see in a lot of emerging markets, right? That the cost of production needs to be actually real, such that
Yes.
such that investments can come. Do you see the government changing its attitude or changing its policies anytime soon in order to enable that?
Yes, it's happening, and again, the government is working on attracting the private investment into the sector, and it's done through different mechanisms. It's done through the private and public partnership model. It's done through the IPP model, and etc. The government is working. The process is progressing, although a little bit slow. But again, all this is coming out from the fact that the deficit is real. Like this winter, for example, the deficit was 100 megawatt. You're talking about shedding 100 megawatt of load this winter.
And what kind of investment, what kind of parties do you see being interested in Mongolia? What kind of investors are lined up, interested to make investments in Mongolia? Where do you get the capital from?
Yes. Again, maybe Mongolia is not for everybody because it's at the early stage of development, and raising specifically debt into such country is a challenge because, from the financial standpoint, maybe the international banks will find it difficult to finance such a country as Mongolia. However, I believe that for a large player, for a large power group, Mongolia might be interested in terms of there being a significant deficit in power and fundamental need for investment into power. Yes. Primarily, I believe that you're talking about the neighboring countries such as China and Russia, which might be interested in seeing the in investing in such countries as Mongolia.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you, Bekzod, for your comments. Well, let's go from a frontier market to a much more developed market. Cameron, Australia. Australia's come up quite a number of times with respect to its power supply situation and power demand situation, most particularly given that power demand hasn't increased as expected and is actually falling down. And as a result, emission levels have gone down as well, despite a strong increase in GDP growth. Zoltan, welcome. Have a seat. We'll come to you in a bit. But from your perspective, what kind of investment opportunities are there really in Australia with that backdrop, with the carbon price, with demand falling, with distributed solar coming in? It's now I think about 12 to 13% of households having a solar panel on their roof. How do you see the investment environment for Australia now and in a few years' time?
Well, what you've identified is a game changer for our industry. So since 2009, we've seen a 7% decline in demand for electricity on the grid. And this has occurred at a time when Australia has been experiencing economic growth. So you've seen a delinking of GDP growth and electricity demand growth. And, representing the major retailers in Australia, who are also in many cases generators, it's a game changer for our industry because we need to think about an environment in which we are generating and retailing something that is in less demand. So, it's needed a change of mindset for my members and my industry going forward. But it does present different types of opportunities. As you've said, we have seen an incredible proliferation of rooftop solar in the country, and that has had some impact on the declining demand. It doesn't really help in many cases with the peak demand, and these customers don't go off grid, so it probably shifts some of the new investment needed to issues like peaking generators. But in many respects, with that level of two-way flow of electricity, people who are producers and consumers, it's making a stronger business case for things like smart meters and investments in the smart grid. We have one of the longest interconnected electricity grid in the world, and that will always be the case. but it's going to be a grid that's going to need to be, I guess, reconfigured for an environment in which there's a lot more distributed generators. And it's also increasing the case in many respects for, as you know, Australia's a mining economy, and there's a lot of off-grid development. There's still a lot of mining exploration and mining development and energy development going on, and it's increasing the case for off-grid generation investment. As I said, I think the major implications are, as you know, we have a renewable energy target in the country. That was implemented with bipartisan support, unlike the carbon price. We have an election in September, which seems likely may see the end of the carbon price, potentially. But that won't change the fact that in many respects the carbon price wasn't seeing a large-scale shift of baseload generation from coal to gas because of that low demand and the fact that the outlook for gas prices in Australia is upwards because of the increasing investment in liquid natural gas on the east coast. So we'll see a linkage of Australian gas prices to the international market. So the perceived switch that we may see in the baseload mix from coal to gas is probably not likely to occur. It's more likely to be going to have a combination of refurbing older baseload generators, investment in peaking generators, as I said, a lot more probably continuing growth with a high grid cost of distributed generation, and a lot more investment in the networks in the area of dealing with things like, and a lot more increase in investment in smart meters and the smart grid to deal with the increasing complexity of the market based around the increasing level of distributed generation.
Fair enough. So you're talking about more investments in the peaking side as well as on the grid component, basically not necessarily baseload, because obviously that's not necessarily required anymore. It's really on linking demand and supply in the best possible manner. Do you see that money flowing right now, or is everyone waiting because there's so much policy uncertainty that they've got no idea what to do?
Well, you're quite right. It's been an environment of unprecedented policy change, and there is a lot of uncertainty around the whole area of climate change policy, although there is a bipartisan emission reductions target. So somehow we've got the potential alternative government in Australia has what's called a direct action policy, and a baseline and credit scheme proposed as part of that with the generation sector. It's very difficult at the moment in Australia to have certainty around the policy environment relating to carbon pricing and climate change. What we do know, though, is that there is a renewable energy target, and that's going to see a large amount of investment in intermittent generation. In terms of wind is likely to be the most competitive form of large-scale generation to take advantage of the renewable energy target. Again, that leads to a need for an increasing generation reserve and increasing levels of backup generation. Now, of course, that's all expensive. You've got to pay for that infrastructure. So I'll come back to the point, if we can find a way to deal with demand side and more use of things like price signals and demand shifting around the peaks, then obviously we can reduce the need for peaking investment. So the business case, both for demand side and for smart grid investment in Australia, is growing each day.
Okay. And how do you see your member associate organisations? How do you see them deal with particularly this this difficult environment? What kind of business models? How are they shifting their outlook towards Australia and towards getting additional revenues and actually good margins?
Well, I guess for them it is, as I said, it's a game changer for the industry and a change of mindset. But I think in many cases, one of the larger players in the industry have been totally vertically integrated. They've been in the fuel cycle, they've been investors in gas, they've been investors in generation, renewable and non-renewable. They're large-scale retailers. They've also, in some cases, been involved in distributed generation. But what we do in the retailing side is we have to change our mindset to, there is a lot of competition for customers in Australia. There's high levels of churn, which is expensive. And so the retailers are looking for ways they can build their customer relationship in a much stronger, higher value-added way to sell more, to make more, to put higher value-added services and to get stickier customers. And so I guess it means that you have to change your thinking from being, the outlook for the company is not based around large-scale growth of the demand for the product we sell. We just have to sell more higher value-added products, get them to stick with us, and look at that your major asset is actually your customer base.
Yeah. Fair enough. So you mentioned a number of problems, obviously for the Australian market, related to energy demand and networks, investments in technologies, that is required. And maybe Zoltan, you can give a bit of your take on the technology angle from, obviously from Canada. Are there specific technologies that are coming up, or different companies with different business models that basically can solve some of those problems that Cameron just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. And just by way, first of all, apologies for coming in late. I was directed into the other room. But there are a whole suite of technologies that are coming up related both on the generation, but more so on the, I'd say on the grid infrastructure, transmission, distribution side, to be able to enable a better integration of renewables within the grid. There's a range of energy storage technologies and smart grid technologies to create more stability around the grid. And in the Canadian context, we have a number of regimes within the different provinces that set targets for renewable energy integration through renewable portfolio standards, through feed-in tariffs, and it's creating a significant amount of stresses on the grid. So we are seeing a range of technologies, storage and smart grid related technologies. We also see an evolving market environment where some of the regulations have not necessarily been in place to facilitate the uptake of some of these technologies. And we have increasing alignment around some of the key stakeholders to be able to bring online some of these. We have some of the technologies that SDTC specifically has supported over the past years and are currently in the late stage development demonstration phase at a fairly large scale, include flywheels, for example, integrated on the grid for power firming, for wind power generation projects, ancillary services as well. The same company, Temporal Power, this advanced flywheel technology company, is also being used for frequency regulation. And that is an evolving market. The economic structures around that market did not necessarily support the business case for integration of storage technologies on the grid. But we've seen some really interesting developments both within the US and Canada, and in Ontario, the IESO are following suit in terms of creating the right economic structures to provide appropriate economic reward or incentive on a performance basis for some of these advanced storage technologies that can provide fast response.
So on the storage technologies, I think I saw some news from Solar City that they think that by 2018 or so, storage will become viable in a US context for homeowners. 2018 is still quite far away. It's at least 5 years. Are those storage technologies now, do you already see circumstances in which they're competitive, in that they can actually solve the variability issue with respect to renewables? Or is there a lot more money that needs to go in order to actually get them to that stage?
It depends on the specific market application. So I don't necessarily market in the near term related to energy storage in home. The reality is in Canada, electricity prices are remarkably cheap in comparison to pretty much anywhere else in the world. The US is very much the same. The Northeast is typically a little bit more expensive. But I mean, in most places, the retail price of electricity can be, depending on the price of day, if it's peak or off peak, but it could be anywhere from 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour up to maybe 15 cents a kilowatt hour. So in the global context, that's very, very cheap. I don't see any real reason necessarily in the near term for energy storage in the home. But what we have seen is, and the examples that I cited around wind firming. So in Ontario, we have the Green Energy Act, and there's specific mandates around the amount of wind that needs to be brought online. The Green Energy Act set these fairly audacious targets, which I think is a good way to go. And Hydro One, which is the large transmission and distribution utility in Ontario, does not have the infrastructure to be able to support the integration of those targets. And so the economics, their choice is upgrade the infrastructure to be able to support the integration of those renewables, mostly wind, some solar, or invest in energy storage. And the comparison, when you look at the economics of upgrading the transmission grid versus putting in storage either within the fence in a wind farm to create more firm power onto the grid, the economics are clear. It absolutely makes sense in that context. There's another area where the economics make sense immediately. It's more in an urban context. So wind farms are obviously more in the rural areas, and that's where the transmission grids tend to be don't have sufficient rating as it is right now. But in an urban context, we have other challenges. And in Toronto, there's a significant amount of intensification. And so our infrastructure, it's a very similar situation, let's say Con Ed is facing in New York City. The infrastructure is all buried. It's all underground. There's no quick and easy means to upgrade that infrastructure and build more capacity into the system. And as more and more condos are being put up, and we're facing more of that intensification, they're making the same calculation. Either they upgrade the infrastructure or they can put in energy storage to be able to buffer some of the peaks and troughs. And the economics there are much more sound.
That's interesting. And who's investing in all of these technologies? If you look at the whole portfolio that you have, that you have, and all of the technologies that are there, are these all small VC PE firms, or are these also larger corporates that are interested in incorporating this, into their portfolio later on as the technology commercializes, or are these also utility firms that are thinking about integration in their products?
It's mostly above, in fact, Milo. So Temporal Power, this advanced flywheel technology company, they've received investment from a venture fund. They've just done a Series B close, a $10 million close. And the initial equity investor, the venture investor, had invested both within the Series A and the Series B. We made an introduction to Enbridge Gas, which is a large natural gas utility and distribution company throughout North America, but it's a Canadian-based company. And Enbridge Gas made a strategic investment in this company as well in their Series B. So they're interested in the broader energy market beyond just natural gas and into power generation. So they've actually invested in a number of different technologies which were not necessarily initially core to their business, but as they expand into kind of more of a broader energy space, it does strategically make sense for them. Enerstore is it's an interesting company that has been established in Ontario. It's like an IPP for storage. So there's been this big debate. We have all these incentives to bring online renewable technologies and integrate them onto the grid. And there's significant incentives through feed-in tariffs for different types of renewables. But we haven't had the same sort of incentives for the integration of storage. And so there's been an argument that's been made for quite some time now that being able to integrate storage, you should be able to get similar types of incentive structures for storage for every kilowatt hour that you're putting back on the grid when it's needed, as well as for every kilowatt hour that you're taking off the grid when it's not needed. And those pieces are starting to come into play. So Enerstore is a unique company that has also made an investment in Temporal Power, but is an IPP. It's a storage technology IPP. So you think of it in terms of the same context as a renewable project developer, but in this case, they're a storage project developer.
That's interesting. Cameron, from your perspective, are there your member companies, have they invested in any of the technologies themselves, or do they just cooperate and look for good products that are on the market that can help them with integration with the distributed solar, etc.?
Well, I think a lot of them in the corporate development teams of the larger players now are having to rethink some of the ways they've operated in the past. And so, yes, they're looking around at various technology options. There's also I suppose, a very transparent project in Australia called the Smart Grid Smart City project, which is funded by the federal government around the city of Newcastle, but it also covers areas of Sydney and rural parts of New South Wales, which is looking at a range of sort of demand-side and technology options, and also around that, a lot of the retailer involved is offering a whole range of different products that are not available in the market today on a test basis. So, I mean, the players in the market, yes, are looking at ways they can deal with the different paradigm they're going to be operating on in the future. And you know, there is an opportunity very much in terms of innovation in Australia going forward. In terms of, you know, the storage technology is going to be, could be the next game changer in terms of making us have a more efficient system. What we have seen is the productivity of the electricity system in Australia has gone down because you know, we're running less electricity through what is still been a period of very high cost investment in the infrastructure. So you know, we have to look at how we use that infrastructure more efficiently in the future.
Fair. Great, and then to back to the frontier markets probably, Patrick, with respect to Karpower International. Well, you've heard that Mongolia's got a demand issue. They need more supply. Obviously, it'd be difficult to get a ship into Mongolia anywhere close. But can you give a bit of a background to your firm and where, you know, what kind of solutions Karpower International has, and also on the investment side of things, you know, who's interested in this?
Okay, thanks. Well, it would be innovative if I could get one into Mongolia. So there's no fear, I'm not coming to Mongolia. The company originally, it's a family-run business. It's one of the top 10 holding companies in Turkey. It's Turkish. Started business in 1948, and it has an in-country IPP business and cross-border selling of electricity into Europe and Iraq from Turkey. And they came up with the idea of taking the business internationally out with of Turkey, and they looked at various options of power generation, and they came up with the concept, and they were the developer of the power ship, where they took basically ships and converted them into floating power plants. So today they're running under contract 1.2 gigawatts of power around the region, around predominantly the Middle East region. And as a new game changer, with something that's unique to the medium term or emergency power generation market, they are positioning themselves with additional fleet coming on over the next 18 months, where they have the ability to deploy large-scale, flexible power plants. You're looking at a 200 megawatt power generation station being delivered within 120 days. Totally integrated with the flexibility of natural gas or heavy fuel oil as fuel sources. Looking at the reasons why, the emergency power generation market and the short-term market for utilities around developing countries has been predominantly by the use of diesel generators. In Africa alone, there's over 3 gigawatts of emergency generation running today, not to count Asia. So bringing in another alternative fuel source and an alternative competitor or opportunity to the market, it's driving down the actual delivered cost of energy to the utility companies. And we're not going to be a 15-year, 20-year IPP with the vessel. The vessel is designed around a 3 to 5 year term. So a medium term to give the utilities time to take stock, get their investments prepared, get ready for what they have to do for the future. You know, utilities growing at 10% a year, there isn't that development going into the country, so there is always this deficit of capacity. We are capacity constrained. So
which utilities, where are your top targets?
If you look at the developing countries, you know, Asia today, Indonesia, Africa, all throughout Africa, you know, places like Nigeria, you know, large power shortfalls, 3,000–4,000 megawatts. So putting in 500–600 megawatts to give them time to start to catch up to the game. Utilities are setting targets to have Ghana, for instance, 5,000 megawatts installed by 2015. Today they're running 1,900. It's not achievable, just from an investment point of view, to get that installed. So this is a stopgap to start letting people catch up to where they need to be until their future permanent investment is installed and delivered.
And what kind of costs are you talking about?
Costs, predominantly you will be looking at sub 20 cents, US cents on HFO, and with gas pricing you'll be somewhere around sub 15 cents using natural gas on a 3-5 year term contract.
15. Okay. That's, well, a lot of countries would need that. Bekzod, is that cheaper than the Russian imports?
No, that's not.
Well, you can't get a ship there anyway, so that's good. So you don't have any competition there. That's great. Are there any comments, questions from the floor for any of the panelists?
So you have several options, of course. So what is the most preferred option in Canada for both load shifting as well as for frequency regulation?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of the question.
You have two issues, load shifting and then frequency regulation. So you need storage systems for these two issues. Mm-hmm. So what are the options preferred in Canada for these two issues?
I think they have, just within Hydro One alone, we're funding a pilot project with them that Hydro One is contributing to several $1 million into, and that's a 5 megawatt storage system. It's the world's largest advanced flywheel energy storage system. Beacon Power had one that was for ancillary services, that's 20 megawatts. They're filing for bankruptcy, but for actual power firming application, this is the world's largest integrated flywheel energy storage one. And Hydro One has indicated if this is a successful demonstration project, as it appears it is, they're hitting all their performance milestones. There's potentially a $1.8 billion market just with Hydro One. Pretty phenomenal with one utility to have that market opportunity. eCamion, which is another one that I referred to, which was more in the community energy storage context. I mean, these are smaller scale lithium-ion based energy storage systems that get it integrated right within a community environment. So you think about a residential setting where you have the pad mount transformers. They basically put on a 750 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery storage system. eCamion is doing the integration. They're sourcing their cells from Dow Kokum, which is a very well-capitalized cell provider from the US, which is a joint venture of Dow and originally Kokum America. And they've built a battery management system, thermal management system, and they're working with Toronto Hydro, who's also contributing several $1 million into this demonstration project to do the control power management system. So the smart grid overlay that determines how to best use that particular asset to manage the peaks and troughs on the grid and make sure that the power quality is being managed within regulatory limits. Again, Toronto Hydro has literally hundreds of millions of dollars, represents hundreds of millions of dollars of market opportunity for that particular technology. And there's certain challenges around our regulatory structure with the Ontario Energy Board and how these things get supported, but a lot of those things are being knocked down by a number of players. There's another technology which I think is also very interesting. Doesn't make as much sense within the Ontario context, but we're demonstrating it and investing in this company. It's called HydroStore. It's a compressed air underwater energy storage system that uses bladders, really low cost bladders. And they have some really interesting IP in terms of how you actually compress the air, how you do the heat transfer, and the control systems around that. And it's, I'm trying to remember, I think it's a couple megawatt project where these bladders are a couple hundred feet down in Lake Ontario, about 7 kilometers out from the city of Toronto. But the market is not so much in Canada as it is in island nations. So they actually have a contract, a signed contract with Aruba that kicks into effect once they hit certain performance milestones through the course of the project that SDTC has invested in alongside with Toronto Hydro. And then you look at places like the Philippines, Indonesia, all of the most of the island nations within the Caribbean. These are phenomenal markets because they have, especially within the Caribbean, and I have a less familiarity around kind of the Indonesia and Philippine market, but in the Caribbean, a lot of these island nations, they're bringing in bunker sea oil. And the costs are tremendous, and there's an energy security concern there. So they're trying to get as much renewables on the grid. And with HydroStore, you can actually reach 100% renewable integration. And it helps enable the economics of renewable energy. So that's an example where it's a different type of technology. It doesn't work in Ontario. It's not as economically attractive or viable in Ontario or in the Canadian context. But in a lot of these other places where there's deep water right offshore, and that's adjacent to heavily populated areas, it's a very attractive option.
Cameron, is there anything for Australia that is coming up in terms of storage technologies? Do you see anything specific, or is it still an open field?
Well, I think you know, Australia's tended to be a technology taker and adopter in many respects, but from the point of view of my members, you have to understand that with a lot of the rooftop solar, the retailers are required to buy back the electricity fed back into the grid. And there's a benchmark rate there. They have to pay for that, or in some cases, obviously, you know, under the original feed-in tariff scheme, some households, the schemes have been wrapped up now, but are guaranteed a certain rate. So the retailers have to use that electricity, and from the householders and the retailers' point of view, household-based storage of that electricity when it's been generated, say, from very efficient solar in the middle of the day in Australia, which could then be stored for use in the peaks. There is a strong business case for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, we've seen well, in particular, lithium-ion coming up significantly over the last few years, in particular because of the cost reductions that have been taking place. I think costs have really come down from, say, $1,000 per kilowatt hour to practically $600 per kilowatt hour just a few months ago on average, and that obviously because of the link to the electric vehicle market and potential upscaling there's significant cost reduction potential in the next few years. So if you're talking about an up-and-coming technology, it's probably that, but compressed air, pumped hydro, pumped storage, and sodium sulfur are still very important technologies on the storage side. Is there any other quick question somewhere?
My question is regarding the coal conversion into gas. What is the priority and what is the cost wise? Where are we to using for the power production? Coal conversion into gas and power production. What is the priority all over the world, and what is the cost wise? Where we are?
I think there's almost no impetus for that particular process in North America, given the price of natural gas. I mean, it's just, nobody would have predicted where we are in terms of the price of natural gas a few years ago. That's been a fundamental shift, and that's actually changed even the calculus in terms of what types of technologies, renewable and other types of energy technologies, make sense within the North American context. So I think that's largely disappeared. I'd probably defer to my colleagues who are more familiar in kind of the Asian marketplace and price of electricity to see whether or not that's viable here, and perhaps prophecy coal.
Well, you're talking about Mongolia. It's a lot of coal, no gas, so it's obvious.
Well, in Australia's case, I mean, obviously the growth in gas is coming from the coalfields, the coal seam gas. Australia's story on the east coast now of unconventional gas taking over from conventional gas, and that's similar in that regard to the US, except our unconventional gas is going to be used for the LNG trade largely. So it's not going to be a game changer in terms of the price of gas. There's lots of it, but a lot of it will be for the export market. So it will keep coal competitive in the domestic environment.
These projects are very few in the world. 1 or 2 projects are there in America, and in China there are 1 or 2 projects. In India, BHEL has started a model operating plant with 6 megawatts IGCC in Tiruchi, and they have come up with an idea to have a joint venture with AP Genco to develop a 182 megawatts IGCC project at Vijayawada. But cost-wise, this is going to be very, very high. Not only the coal gasification plant, but the auxiliaries like coal handling system, ash handling system has made very unviable. So the Planning Commission has finally asked AP Genco and the PHL to drop the idea. That is what is happening to IGCC. Nowhere it is coming up. Thank you.
I think we have to wrap up. I think we had a very interesting combination of investment opportunities, either on the technology front in Canada, specifically on storage, new frontier market of Mongolia. If you've got some money to spare, certainly look at investing in some of the power generation capacity there. Obviously Australia with a bit of policy uncertainty, but enough opportunity specifically on the grid side. And then key power generation ships that can be dispatched anywhere in the world to satisfy the strong energy demand that's in many of the emerging markets. Thanks for your comments all. Please give them a good round of applause.